And well, also some big development in the Iran-Israel conflict. The IDF has issued an unprecedented evacuation warning for Iranian civilians. In a message on social media X, IDF spokesperson Colonel Aviche Adrai has asked all Iranians present or expected to be present in or around military weapons manufacturing facilities and their supporting institutions to evacuate those areas immediately and not return until further notice. Now, this in an indication that Iran's weapons manufacturing facilities could come under Israeli attack. The message further added that being near these facilities would pose a risk to their lives. All right, so now to discuss more, we're now being joined live by Ilan Levy from Tel Aviv. He is a former Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Hello, good morning.
Well, if you could just help us understand the ground situation in Israel right now and help us also understand what are the current sentiments among people in Israel.
It was a dramatic escalation overnight as the Iranian regime launched a massive barrage of ballistic missiles at civilian areas, aiming at civilian homes. Israelis are waking up now to the news that 10 people are dead, including children, and many others are missing under the rubble because of the collapse of buildings attacked with Iranian ballistic missiles. Israelis have a steely resolve. They're trying to go about their days as normal to keep as much of a routine as possible. But there is a special state of emergency in Israel. Workplaces are closed, gatherings are forbidden, and Israelis know that we have many difficult days ahead as Israel continues to destroy the Iranian illegal nuclear weapons program and Iran's dangerous ballistic weapons program.
Right. Also, we just heard recently from U.S. President Trump saying that U.S. had nothing to do with the attack on Iran. He further has written that U.S. can get a deal done between Israel and Iran and end the current conflict. Do you think that is a possibility at this point?
The only possibility for a deal is if the Iranian regime is willing to peacefully dismantle its uranium enrichment capabilities. The United States has said Iran cannot be allowed to enrich any uranium because its path to a nuclear weapon must be shut completely. If the Iranian regime wants to negotiate the peaceful dismantling of its enrichment sites, that would be a welcome development. Until now, however, the Iranians have been trying to stretch out negotiations in order to break out towards a nuclear bomb. And let's understand why this escalation is happening. Israel has taken this conflict to Iran, holding it accountable for its regional aggression because it identified that Iran was beginning to assemble a nuclear weapon and it would be too late if Israel didn't act now. So if the Iranians want to act in good faith to dismantle their nuclear weapons project and enrichment, that would be a very positive step. Otherwise, Israel is going to dismantle it for them.
And that being said, reports are also saying that Israel is asking for help from U.S. to fully dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities. What is your take on that? Do you think Israel needs U.S. support at this point? Or is there a sense of underestimating Iran looking at the damage and casualties seen across Israel at this moment?
Israel has managed to achieve astonishing success over Iran with the surprise attack. Israeli jets now have complete aerial superiority over Western Iran. Israel controls the skies over Tehran. And so Iran's leaders should be very careful before choosing to escalate further with ballistic missile attacks on Israeli cities. But the big question is the underground illegal nuclear site at Fordow. And Iran built that nuclear site so deep underground, not because it's a peaceful site to develop medical isotopes, but because it's part of Iran's nuclear weapons program. That's why they wanted to hide it under a mountain. And it's not clear whether Israel has the munitions necessary to destroy it. That may require the United States to do it. For now, Israel is acting alone in order to save the world from the dramatic threat of the Iranian regime having nuclear weapons. And one can only hope that the United States, seeing how much damage Israel has already done to the nuclear program, will step in and deliver that final blow and help to save the world from an Iranian regime with nuclear weapons.
So they're, of course, saying that Israel is looking forward to take help from U.S. Is somehow true.
Well, Israel has not, to the best of my knowledge, officially requested that support. But I think the United States, looking at the situation in the Middle East and asking what is America's interest while the Iranian nuclear program is so completely exposed, if the Iranians refuse good faith diplomacy, then America's interest is to make sure that Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb.
And so do you think there is a possibility of any kind of diplomatic talks, since Trump had already said that doors are open? And would Israel be willing to also take a look at all the talks that can happen diplomatically?
Israel took this dramatic step to take military action against the nuclear program because diplomacy had failed, because Iran now has enough highly enriched uranium for several nuclear bombs. It's only a step away from weapons-grade uranium, and began work on assembling a nuclear bomb. Diplomacy had failed and military action had to happen at the last possible minute. And now the Iranian regime has two choices. Either it can dismantle its enrichment program as part of a diplomatic deal, or Israel will dismantle that enrichment program militarily. One way or another, a regime that continually calls for Israel's destruction, that says that Israel must be eliminated, that is indiscriminately firing ballistic missiles at Israeli population centers, cannot have a nuclear weapon and cannot have a path to a nuclear weapon. I hope, of course, that they will take America's option to negotiate and dismantle those enrichment facilities themselves.
All right. Well, the attacks did start from nuclear facilities towards nuclear facilities and then shifted to military headquarters and recently the oil and gas facilities. Is there some kind of shift in target and strategy?
I think what Israel is trying to do is, first of all, degrade the Iranian regime's ability to continue waging a war of aggression against Israel. Let's remember, Israel has been under attack by the Iranian regime and its proxy armies for 20 months now. The October 7th massacre, Hamas's invasion on October 7th, 2023, was the opening shot of a regional war by Iran and its proxies against Israel. And Israel, having demolished those proxies, is now holding Iran directly accountable for its regional aggression. And what Israel is doing, instead of going after all the nuclear facilities at the beginning, is taking out Iran's ballistic missiles, taking out the launchers, taking out the top commanders to make sure that the Iranian regime cannot respond with the firepower that it wanted against Israeli civilians. The night before last, the Iranian regime wanted to fire 1,000 ballistic missiles at Israel overnight, according to the New York Times. That would have been Armageddon. Can you imagine 1,000 ballistic missiles at the same time? Instead, they only managed around 150 because Israel had disrupted their ability to launch ballistic missiles. So I think first Israel is trying to degrade Iran's ability to continue waging a war of aggression in order to leave the path free to go after those illegal nuclear weapon programs and dangerous ballistic missile programs.
Right, and that being said, have these strikes reduced Iran's capability to enrich, or, as experts are pointing to, may have just spurred Iran to rebuild more nuclear bombs, likely more quickly? Is Israel achieving the core objective, or maybe has escalated Iran's ambition to enrich its nuclear capabilities more?
As I said, Israel's strategy seems to be first to degrade Iran's ability to wage war and to retaliate, and then to go after the nuclear facilities when they are exposed and Iran cannot retaliate to protect them. So on the first day, Israel destroyed the above ground section of the illegal Natanz nuclear facility. It attacked the nuclear facility at Isfahan as well, but it's prioritizing stopping Iran from being able to launch ballistic missiles to protect those nuclear facilities. Israeli jets now control the skies over Tehran, and I'm sure that as Israel continues to attack Iran's launchers so that they cannot fire thousands of missiles at Israel in one go, we will see more serious action to destroy the Iranian enrichment facilities in order to block the path to a bomb of this regime that, I'll keep saying because it's not obvious, is openly sworn and committed to Israel's destruction. And that is why Israel says this regime cannot have the weapons to destroy Israel.
Right, and several top Iranian military commanders and scientists have been killed in Israeli strikes. Is the Iranian supreme leader also on target, given that the Israeli military spokesperson did not deny to a question in this regard?
I think Israel right now is dealing with the military command of the Iranian military and IRGC, but the supreme leader of Iran should not assume that he is off limits. Certainly, if he continues to order mass, indiscriminate ballistic missile attacks against Israeli civilians, Israel now controls the skies over Tehran, and he should consider very carefully whether to continue a war of aggression against the Israeli people.
Right, and it has already been 3 years of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Now, how prolonged do you think would this war be?
20 months. This started
Yes.
October 7th, 2023. Just less than 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And are we looking at a Russia-Ukraine war scenario-like situation here?
I think that's extremely unlikely, given the damage that Israel has already inflicted on the Iranian regime in just the opening days of this war. Israel is hoping to be able to deliver a knockout blow against Iran, but Iran can choose to try to wage a war of attrition against Israel that Israel can make extremely costly for it. Israel doesn't want this war to drag on. The whole purpose of this operation is to stop Iran being able to wage its war of aggression against Israel. We've seen Hamas having been massively degraded, Hezbollah knocked out of action. It's no longer able to retaliate against Israel. And Israel hopes that if it delivers a knockout blow to the Iranian nuclear project and ballistic missile program, that Iran's leaders will get the message. And of course, there is always the hope, as both Israeli leaders and the crown prince of Iran have said, that the Iranian people will take this opportunity to rise up against the oppressive regime that has impoverished them for 50 years and take back control of their country, and that Israel and Iran can have peace once again.
So do you mean to say that these attacks by Israel were also, one of the goals could be to cater to a regime change?
The official goals of the war are to neutralize the existential threats of the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile program. But as a consequence of these attacks, the regime is undeniably very severely undermined and weakened. And Israel hopes, this is not a goal of the war, but it would be a positive outcome. Israel hopes that the Iranian people will overthrow the regime, and therefore we can have peace between Israel and Iran. Let's remember, the root of the conflict between Israel and Iran is that Iran says death to Israel, and Israel refuses to comply. Iran wants to destroy Israel, and Israel wants to exist. And if Iran's leaders accept the state of Israel and stop trying to destroy it, there is no conflict between Israel and Iran, and there can be peace in the Middle East.
Right, and that being said, Germany, France, and the UK has offered to hold talks with Iran on nuclear program. Do you think this can help in de-escalating the situation in West Asia?
I think we should pay very careful attention to what these countries are saying, because the UK, France, and Germany know that Iran is an enemy state. They are deeply concerned by the Iranian nuclear weapons program and Iran's enrichment of uranium. Notice they're not condemning Israel's attacks against Iran and telling it to stop. They're trying to leverage those attacks to get Iran to negotiate in good faith. France understands that Israeli military action is the only reason that Iranian leaders have to come to the table and actually negotiate dismantling their uranium enrichment facilities. So, as I said, with the Israeli jets now controlling the skies of Tehran, Iran's nuclear facilities totally exposed to Israeli air power, Iranian leaders have a choice to make. And I hope they make a rational choice. They can choose to continue indiscriminately shooting ballistic missiles at Israeli civilians to try to protect their illegal nuclear weapons program. or they can choose to negotiate the peaceful dismantling of their enrichment facilities and end this war. And I can only hope that calmer heads will prevail and they will go with the rational option instead of continuing this war of aggression.
Right, and that being said, so there are a lot of critics do suggest that this is Prime Minister Netanyahu's war, not Israel's. How much of credit do you think you can give to this statement?
No, the idea that the Prime Minister is launching this offensive against Iran for political reasons is absurd. The Iranian regime is openly sworn to Israel's destruction. They lead crowds in chants of death to Israel at every major public gathering. There is a clock in the center of Tehran with a countdown to 2040, which is the date the Iranian leader predicts Israel will be destroyed. Iran's supreme leader said just a month ago that Israel is a cancer that must be eradicated. Any Israeli leader seeing Iran on the cusp of nuclear weapons, rapidly accelerating their production of ballistic missiles, would have to do something about this existential threat. Because an Iranian regime that says it wants to destroy Israel and has the conventional and non-conventional weapons to destroy Israel is an existential threat that Israel cannot tolerate. And that's why, despite the heavy losses inside Israel, we're waking up to news of 10 civilians killed overnight in Iranian ballistic missile attacks. There is an understanding in Israel that we have to do something against the Iranian threat. And Iran cannot be allowed to develop nuclear weapons and more ballistic missiles. It's an existential threat for the entire country.
All right. Of course, we'll be looking at how, of course, losses is at both sides. But of course, we're going to see if this could actually be handled diplomatically would be a better solution. But thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and giving your insights. Thanks so much.
Anytime.